I think going into week 16 is the perfect time to evaluate your team and cut some of the dead weight from your fantasy hockey team so far this season, guys. We have a big enough sample at this point to where we can determine where players are playing, roughly their upside going forward, and with confidence we can say, okay, these guys might not be it for the rest of the season. So there's going to be a couple of hot takes in this video for 6 must-drop players before week 16, but I'm Chris. Welcome back to another Fantasy Puck video. Let's get right into it. Up first, we have Joonas Korpisalo of the Ottawa Senators. He's 51% owned currently and is 2-7-0 in his last 10 games played, with a .862 save percentage in those 10 games, guys. In the last 10 games, he's only had over a 900 save percentage once in those last 10. Volume is good. I get that. You want a goalie that is going to start a ton of games for you, especially in points leagues, but it's not good when this goalie lets in 3 or more goals pretty much every single game and loses. I just don't see any upside with Korpisalo going forward, given the current state of the Ottawa Senators. Only 2 goalies in the National Hockey League have a worse goal saved above expected. The other one of those 2 is actually in this video as well, which we'll get to later on. But it doesn't look like the Sens are going with another goaltender either. Like, no Matt Sogard, and Tom Forsberg doesn't seem to be getting a lot of volume either. I don't know what's happening with this team. I honestly think it might have to do with the contract of Korpisalo. They need to find a way to get this guy going, and he simply just is not playing well at all and hasn't been the entire duration of the season. So for me, even though he's 51% owned, I think Korpisalo is a drop in most 10 to 12 team leagues, and I think going forward, you should just look for better goaltender options. Up next, we have Cozens, and I still think this guy does have some upside, unlike some of the rest of the players on this video, but he's got 4 points in his last 10 games. He's 50% owned on the year and is playing under 16 minutes average time on ice in his last 5. His shooting percentage is down from 6.7, where his career average kind of hovers around that 10.2% mark. His shots per 60 are also slightly down from last year, but it's not a significant drop. I just think with Cozens, he hasn't really shown any signs of breaking off from this slump this year. He had a fantastic year last year with the Buffalo Sabres, scoring a ton of goals, but this year he just hasn't been finding the score sheet consistently enough. The shot volume is good. The hit volume he kind of chips in with his hits and his blocks as well. He's been an anchor on most teams this year, and I think honestly he is worth a drop in 10-team leagues. If you're in a 12-team league, I'd probably hold on to this guy, but for 10-team leagues where you need every single amount of scoring that you can get, just given the fact that a lot of the players are much higher quality, and you just have this guy on your team weighing you down the entire time, I think he's worth a drop in 10-team leagues. Just going forward, I think there, like I said, is still some upside for this guy, but in specifically 10-team leagues, I think Cozens is a drop. In 12-team leagues, I completely understand if you want to hold on to him. I'm probably holding on him in my 12-team leagues with this guy, given the fact that he could still have some upside in the second half of the season, and maybe he turns around his season, but it's not looking like it's going to be a good year for Cozens going forward. Up next, we have Travis Sanheim of the Philadelphia Flyers. He's 49% owned currently, and he's got 1 point in his last 10 games played. I think with Drysdale being brought into the equation, the power play upside is now a little bit in question with Sanheim. Again, we haven't really been able to see a big sample of what Philly wants to do with Drysdale and what they want to do with Sanheim going forward, at least from a power play perspective, due to the fact that Drysdale did suffer a slight injury and was kept out of a couple of his recent games. But again, regardless of the fact whoever's power play won there, the fact that Philly's power play is the worst in the National Hockey League just doesn't give him a lot of upside to begin with. His shots per 60 are still low on top of that. He hovers around that 4.5 shots per 60 rate. And the peripherals really aren't great either for Sanheim going forward. He chips in a couple hits, a couple blocks here. It's nothing too crazy or warranted given the fact that, you know, he's 49% owned. And I think his production is kind of equal to his value now. And if he's got 1 point in his last 10, it doesn't look too good going forward for Sanheim. He's just become this high time on ice, low event defenseman. He plays over 20 minutes average time on ice throughout the year and probably will continue to going forward. But I think going forward with Sanheim, there just isn't really a lot of upside if he doesn't continue to produce at the rate that he has been throughout the majority of the season. So if he's starting to slow down, I think he's worth a drop in 10 to 12 team leagues, depending on your defense situation. Obviously, I know in some leagues it's very, very scarce, but for me right now, Travis Sanheim is a drop going into week 16. Up next, we have Evan Rodrigues of the Florida Panthers. He's 39% owned. He does have 6 points in his last 15 games, but he's currently playing line 3 and power play 2 and averaging well below 15 minutes average time on ice in his last 10 games. He also hasn't really been shooting the puck as much either. He's got less than 3 shots in 9 of his last 10. And I think going forward, unless there is a major injury in Florida, there's just not a lot of long-term upside for Evan Rodrigues. He was really good the majority of the first half of the season. He, again, played line 1, got power play 1 time due to the fact that guys like Sam Bennett were injured. And again, I just think going forward, there isn't really a lot of upside with Erod. He's been great the majority of the season, but we've seen due to the fact that he's not getting as much ice time now, that his shots per game rate has really kind of dropped. And with Erod, again, the hits are nice. He kind of chips it in the hits. He kind of chips it in the blocks. So in 12-plus team leagues, I think he's worth a hold, especially in some of those deeper leagues. But in the shallower 10 to 12 team leagues, I think Erod is worth a drop. I think you can find much better options with a lot more upside going forward. And again, in some 12-team leagues, I would even drop this guy, just given the fact that he just doesn't seem to be at least producing enough to have him rostered on your team. And their peripherals just aren't good enough, in my opinion, to have him rostered so far. So unless there's a major injury, I just don't think there is a lot of upside for Erod going forward, and I recommend that you drop him. Ilya Samsonov is on this list and should be dropped. And pretty much, I can't even think of a league where you would want to roster this guy now. He's 35% owned. Like I said, there's no reason to have him rostered unless you're tanking. Joseph Woll is now coming back from that high ankle sprain and is traveling with the team, and it looks like it'll be him and Martin Jones going forward. Samsonov has had below a 870 save percentage in his last 5 games played and will likely be sent down to the AHL again or waived or traded of some sort. The Leafs can't really afford to risk playing this guy going forward. He's just shown, even with his little conditioning stint and kind of revamp in the AHL there after coming back, it just hasn't changed much, and I don't see it changing going forward for the Leafs. He's actually the worst goalie in the National Hockey League in terms of goals saved above expected. He's not getting any volume. He is an absolute dumpster fire every time he does touch the crease. So for me, he's just not worth rostering. I don't see there being any upside going forward as well, so you're pretty safe to drop this guy in pretty much any league, like I said, that I could think of going forward. Unless this guy just miraculously changes around his entire season after the All-Star break, I just don't see him being rostered on any fantasy hockey team going forward. And finishing up our list, we have another Toronto Maple Leaf in Tyler Bertuzzi. He's 22% owned currently. He does have 5 points in his last 10 games, but 2 of those games have been multi-point games. He's averaging well under 15 minutes average time on ice in his last 10 games on top of that. He's line 2 power play 2, which would think it kind of gives him a little bit of upside, but there is no really offensive upside for Bertuzzi. If you look at his game log, he's had under 2 shots on goal in 9 of his last 10 games. The peripherals are just very inconsistent. Like, he'll have 1 to 2 hits, maybe a block or 2 in there as well, but it's just incredibly inconsistent. If he was hitting like 2 to 3 times a game, I could understand like rostering this guy. Like, it would be somebody that's very similar to like Ivan Barbashev, for example, where you're getting top 6 upside on a good team with talented forwards, and yes, you're not producing at the rate that you should be, but there's still a little bit of upside there, and given the fact that your peripherals are at a decent rate, you're still rosterable. But with Bertuzzi, like I said, it's just too inconsistent when it comes to his peripherals. He's currently on pace for 39 points and only 12 goals. That's right, he only has 6 goals on the year, guys. Really, really disappointing of a signing for the Leafs in general, but I think going forward, especially in 12-plus team leagues, and if you have him rostered for whatever reason in a 10-team league, you can definitely drop this guy going forward. That is going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed the content. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought of the video. I did have a couple hot takes in here. I know Dylan Cozens is, again, somebody I think that could have some upside going forward potentially, but we just haven't seen it at all from him this season. So let me know in the comments down below who you think is an absolute must drop. I was also considering Cam Talbot, but I just don't think you drop him at this point. I think you kind of just have to weather the storm and what's going on in LA right now. Always very interested to see what you guys have to say in the comments down below. So let me know know what you guys think. I will see you in the next video. Have yourselves a fantastic rest of the day.